Imagine a Britain where the voices of its own citizens are silenced with the force of law, where even peaceful protesters and farmers, those who have long been the backbone of the nation, are arrested for simply voicing their discontent. Aimé. Country where the ruling government is tightening its grip, and the monarchy, once a symbol of unity, is now facing a crisis unlike any before. This isn't some dystopian fantasy, it's Britain in 2025. And the situation has gotten so dire that even King Charles, usually the picture of calm, has spoken out. What has pushed the monarchy to this breaking point? What's driving Prime Minister Keir Starmer's crackdown on dissent, and how is it all leading to a monumental shift in the UK's political landscape? Britain is teetering on the edge of a political and social storm. The public, disillusioned by decades of stagnant politics, is now waking up to the reality of a government that seems willing to do anything to maintain control. In the latest chapter of this unfolding saga, Prime Minister Keir Starmer's government has launched a sweeping crackdown on dissenters, targeting ordinary voters, protesters, and even farmers who dared to oppose his policies. This isn't about small disagreements or minor protests. This is a full-scale assault on free speech and democracy. The government has ordered the arrest of dozens of people, many of whom were simply standing up for their beliefs in public forums or local community gatherings. The catalyst for this crackdown, a controversial inheritance tax on agricultural land, a policy that has sparked outrage across rural Britain. Farmers, already struggling under the weight of rising costs and an increasingly unfriendly political environment, were blindsided by this devastating move. The tax, designed to target family-run farms, has forced many farmers to sell their ancestral lands just to cover the cost of the new tax bill. These families, who have worked the same land for generations, are now being forced to abandon their livelihoods, or worse, risk losing everything. And it wasn't just the farmers who were affected. Ordinary voters, those who have seen their own communities torn apart by soaring taxes, rising energy costs and shrinking services, are now finding themselves caught in the crossfire. What started as a legitimate protest against government policies soon escalated. Mass protests erupted across rural England, particularly in places like Kent, Lincolnshire and Somerset. Tractors lined the roads, livestock markets came to a halt, and fields were transformed into makeshift protest camps. Farmers and their supporters rallied against the tax, demanding that the government hear their voices. But instead of engaging in dialogue or even attempting to understand the depth of public frustration, Starmer responded with brute force. Police were deployed in droves to suppress the demonstrations, arresting anyone who dared to speak out. Over 300 people were detained, many without charge, as their images flooded social media. Teary-eyed mothers, elderly farmers, young workers, dragged away by law enforcement in a scene that looked more like a totalitarian regime than a democratic nation. This heavy-handed approach by Starmer's government has only fueled the anger of the people. The backlash has been swift and intense, spreading beyond the farming community to urban centres, where ordinary voters are now questioning the legitimacy of a government that would arrest its own citizens for speaking their mind. And it's not just the arrests that have caused outrage, it's the sheer hypocrisy of a government that claims to represent the working class, only to turn on them when they express dissent. What happened to the Labour Party's promises of protecting the vulnerable? What happened to the values of free speech and democratic participation? This isn't just a political issue, it's a moral one. The British public, already angry over the government's failure to address rising costs and broken promises, is now being told that their voices no longer matter. They are being told that if they speak out against the government, they will be treated as criminals. And in the midst of this political chaos, King Charles, the symbolic figurehead of the nation, has had enough. According to sources close to the palace, the monarch's patience has run out. King Charles, known for his calm and measured demeanour, reportedly erupted in fury when he learned that peaceful protesters, some of whom were elderly or disabled, had been dragged away by police for nothing more than speaking at a local community meeting. His Majesty, the King, is said to have slammed his fist on the table in private meetings with advisers, declaring, "This is not the country my mother left behind. This is authoritarianism dressed up as progress." In a highly unusual move, King Charles made his displeasure known to Prime Minister Keir Starmer in a private phone call. A source close to the monarchy revealed that the king issued a stern warning to the Prime Minister: "You are testing the patience of this nation and that of the Crown itself." For King Charles, this wasn't just about the growing political crisis. It was about the very heart of Britain's identity as a democratic nation. For a monarch who has long been a symbol of national unity and stability, seeing his own people treated like criminals for simply standing up for what they believe in was a step too far. But despite the king's anger, Starmer has refused to back down. Instead, he has doubled down on his policies, tightening protest laws, expanding surveillance and making vague threats about restricting political speech. His government's actions have sparked fears that the growing opposition, particularly from the fast-rising Reform UK party, is being targeted. Starmer's crackdown on dissent is being seen by many as an attempt to silence his critics and maintain control at any cost. But in doing so, he may have just made a fatal political miscalculation. The more he cracks down on free speech, the more the public begins to see the cracks in his leadership, and the stronger the resistance becomes. The political fallout from Keir Starmer's crackdown on dissent is rippling through British society, and the consequences are becoming increasingly dire for the Labour government. As protests continue to spread across the nation, an escalating wave of resistance is beginning to take shape, one that could potentially change the trajectory of British politics forever. The frustration of the public, now intensified by the government's authoritarian actions, has catalysed the rise of a powerful new political force, Reform UK. This party, once seen as a fringe movement, has now become a rallying point for those disillusioned with the establishment parties, particularly the Labour Party under Starmer's leadership. Reform UK, led by former UKIP leader Richard Tice, has gained significant traction among voters who feel betrayed by the mainstream parties. The party's platform is built around a firm commitment to restoring democracy and free speech, two pillars that are increasingly under threat in the current political climate. The government's heavy-handed response to protests, along with Starmer's attempts to suppress dissent, has only fueled Reform UK's rise. It has positioned itself as the champion of the people, pledging to dismantle the policies that have led to widespread anger and discontent. What began as a political fringe movement now finds itself at the centre of a national conversation about the future of the country's democracy. One of the key factors driving Reform UK's growing support is the sheer scale of government overreach. Starmer's administration has not only enacted restrictive protest laws, but has also expanded surveillance capabilities and made vague threats to limit political speech. This increasing authoritarianism has left many feeling that their democratic rights are under siege. The government's actions have undermined the very foundation of British democracy: the right to protest, the right to speak freely, and the right to disagree with those in power without fear of retribution. And while Starmer continues to insist that these measures are necessary for national security and public order, the public perception is shifting. Many see his actions not as a safeguard of democracy, but as a direct assault on the freedoms that have long been the cornerstone of British society. The tensions between the Labour government and its growing opposition are further amplified by the royal response to the crackdown. King Charles, a figure historically known for his reserved and impartial stance, has emerged as a significant voice of dissent. His outspoken criticism of the government's treatment of protesters has put him at odds with the Prime Minister, raising questions about the role of the monarchy in times of political crisis. The King's public and private comments about the growing authoritarianism under Starmer's leadership have given a voice to those who feel that their concerns are being ignored by the political elite. The monarchy, despite its largely ceremonial role, has become a symbol of resistance for many who fear that their country is sliding into dictatorship. The royal intervention has had a profound impact on the national conversation. King Charles's condemnation of Starmer's actions, particularly his call for a return to democratic principles, has resonated with a public increasingly worried about the state of their nation. The monarchy's position in British society, though not actively involved in day-to-day politics, carries immense moral weight. When the king speaks out against government policies, especially in such a pointed and public manner, it forces the eye public to confront the gravity of the situation. For many, the monarchy's traditional role as a unifying figure is now intertwined with their own struggle for freedom and democracy. This has set the stage for a dramatic confrontation between the Labour government and the rising tide of opposition, both political and public. The establishment's refusal to acknowledge the demands of ordinary citizens has created a vacuum that Reform UK is eager to fill. The party's leaders, including Richard Tice, have seized the moment to position themselves as the true defenders of the people's will, vowing to dismantle the authoritarian measures enacted by Starmer's government. Their message has resonated, particularly with those who feel that the political elite, in their eagerness to retain power, has lost touch with the real issues facing the country. But the rise of Reform UK is not without its challenges. While it has captured the attention of many voters, it still faces the daunting task of overcoming the entrenched political establishment. The Labour Party, despite its internal fractures and mounting public discontent, remains a formidable political force. Starmer's leadership is still supported by many within his party and across the political spectrum, despite his increasingly authoritarian tactics. The challenge for Reform UK is to convert growing frustration into sustained political momentum. It will need to convince voters that it offers a viable alternative to the status quo, one that can restore the values of democracy, free speech, and individual liberty. The next few months are critical for the future of British politics. The mighty actions of the Labour government, coupled with the rise of Reform UK, have set the stage for a political realignment that could reshape the landscape of the nation. Public opinion, already deeply divided, is shifting rapidly as people grapple with the implications of Starmer's actions. If the Prime Minister continues down the path of suppressing dissent and curtailing democratic freedoms, he risks alienating an even larger portion of the electorate. The more he cracks down on free speech, the more he strengthens the opposition, particularly the growing wave of support for Reform UK. This political crisis is not just a struggle between two parties, it is a battle for the soul of the nation. Will Britain remain a beacon of democracy, where free speech and dissent are protected? Or will it descend into a state of authoritarian control, where the government's word is law and the voices of the people are silenced? The answer to that question will determine the future of British politics, and the future of the United Kingdom itself. As the political tension continues to build within the United Kingdom, the long-term consequences of Keir Starmer's decision to crack down on dissent are becoming more apparent. His increasingly authoritarian approach to governance, exemplified by his heavy-handed response to protests, has not only alienated a significant portion of the electorate, but has also ignited a political wildfire that threatens to consume the Labour Party's dominance. Starmer's approach, which includes expanding surveillance powers and curbing the right to protest, has begun to provoke widespread backlash from the public and various political factions, especially from those within his own party. It is becoming evident that the Labour leader's insistence on suppressing opposition in the name of public order and national security is rapidly eroding his credibility, and the repercussions are only just beginning to unfold. In the wake of these developments, the rise of Reform UK cannot be ignored. What was once a marginal political party has now grown into a formidable force, attracting a diverse coalition of disillusioned voters who feel betrayed by both Labour and the Conservative Party. Reform UK's ability to tap into the growing public frustration has allowed the party to gain a foothold in political discussions, positioning itself as the alternative to the establishment parties that have seemingly abandoned the electorate's best interests. This newfound momentum has given the party an unprecedented level of attention, and its leaders, including Richard Tice, have seized the opportunity to frame themselves as defenders of British democracy against the overreach of Starmer's government. Tice's party's message resonates with a large portion of the population that feels their voices are being drowned out by an elite political class more concerned with maintaining power than addressing the needs of the people. The Labour government's crackdown on protests and free speech has created a groundswell of anger, with many questioning whether the very foundations of British democracy are being undermined. Reform UK has capitalised on this by positioning itself as a beacon of hope for those who believe that the government has overstepped its bounds and that the rights of the individual are being eroded in the name of state control. With Starmer's government pushing forward with policies that many see as anti-democratic, Reform UK's call for a return to a more accountable and transparent government has resonated widely, particularly among working-class voters and rural communities who feel ignored by the current political system. At the heart of this political upheaval lies a fundamental disagreement over the role of government in regulating public life. Starmer's administration has justified its actions by invoking the need for national security and maintaining public order. However, critics argue that these measures represent a significant erosion of civil liberties, a stance that has sparked heated debates across the political spectrum. Starmer's attempts to silence critics, both in the media and among ordinary citizens, have led to accusations that he is fostering an environment of political suppression reminiscent of authoritarian regimes. These actions have created a deep sense of disillusionment among the public, and with each passing day, more people are beginning to question whether the Labour Party still represents their values. Reform UK's rise is, in many ways, a direct result of this disillusionment. As the government cracks down on dissent, the party has emerged as a vocal advocate for free speech, democratic accountability, and a government that is more responsive to the will of the people. Reform UK's platform, focused on reducing the power of the state and empowering individuals, appeals to those who feel that their freedoms are under attack. This message has garnered significant support from those who believe that Starmer's Labour Party is no longer the party of the people, but rather the party of the establishment. The increasing polarisation of British politics, with Labour leaning towards more authoritarian measures and Reform UK positioning itself as the defender of democratic values, is setting the stage for a political battle that will likely define the future of the UK's political landscape. Meanwhile, the monarchy's role in this crisis has also taken on greater significance. King Charles, who has traditionally maintained a neutral stance in political matters, has found himself embroiled in the debate over the government's crackdown on dissent. The King's public remarks, criticising the government's overreach and calling for a return to democratic values, have made waves across the country. His words have given a voice to those who feel that their concerns are being ignored by both the government and the political elite. While the monarchy's position is symbolic and not directly involved in policy-making, King Charles's comments have had a profound impact on the national discourse, reminding the British public of the importance of upholding democratic principles. His intervention has added a layer of moral authority to the opposition to Starmer's policies, signalling that even the traditional symbols of British society are standing against what is perceived as a drift towards authoritarianism. The involvement of the monarchy in this political crisis has further complicated the situation for the Labour Party. Starmer, already under intense scrutiny for his handling of protests and dissent, now faces the added challenge of confronting public opposition that is not only coming from political rivals, but also from a figure of immense cultural significance. King Charles's comments have cast doubt on the government's legitimacy, giving the opposition a powerful symbol to rally behind. This dynamic has shifted the conversation from a simple political disagreement to a broader debate over the future direction of the country. The monarchy's alignment with the values of free speech and democracy has bolstered the ranks of those calling for a return to the principles that have traditionally defined British governance. The ongoing tension between the Labour government and the increasing opposition forces, both political and public, has set the stage for a confrontation that will ultimately determine the future of the UK's political system. The rise of Reform UK is not just a challenge to the Labour Party, but also a signal that the electorate is no longer willing to accept a government that disregards their fundamental rights. The growing support for Reform UK is a direct response to Starmer's policies, which many see as a betrayal of the democratic values that the UK has long held dear. The question now is whether Starmer can recover from this political crisis, or whether Reform UK will continue to capitalise on his growing unpopularity, ultimately reshaping the future of British politics. As Keir Starmer's crackdown on dissent intensifies, the political landscape in the United Kingdom is undergoing a profound shift. The strategic implications of these measures are becoming increasingly evident, particularly in how they are influencing public perception of the Labour Party and creating opportunities for smaller political entities like Reform UK. Starmer's decision to use heavy-handed tactics against voters, farmers and protesters who oppose his government's policies has sparked fierce criticism from all corners of the political spectrum. This strategy, which he defends as necessary for maintaining public order, is simultaneously alienating voters and damaging Labour's reputation as the party of the people. As discontent with the Labour Party grows, an important question arises. Can Starmer maintain control of the narrative, or is he inadvertently paving the way for a new political force to take hold? Reform UK, previously known as the Brexit Party, is one of the most significant political entities benefiting from this situation. The rise of Reform UK is not merely a result of ideological alignment, but also a consequence of public frustration with both the Labour and Conservative parties. In a political climate where voters are increasingly disillusioned with the two main parties, Reform UK has positioned itself as a fresh alternative, one that promises to restore democratic values and challenge the establishment. As Starmer's government faces backlash over its crackdown on protests and free speech, Reform UK has skillfully positioned itself as the champion of individual rights and liberties. This positioning is particularly appealing to voters who feel sidelined by the traditional political class, and it is resonating strongly with the electorate in key constituencies across the country. The appeal of Reform UK lies in its commitment to reinvigorating British democracy and limiting the reach of the state. With Starmer's Labour Party adopting policies that critics argue infringe on civil liberties, Reform UK has seized the opportunity to advocate for greater transparency, accountability, and protection of free speech. Its focus on reducing government control and restoring public trust has gained significant traction among voters who feel that the government's crackdown on dissent is a direct assault on their rights. This has allowed Reform UK to gain a foothold in British politics and attract support from a wide range of demographic groups, including former Labour voters who are no longer willing to support a party they perceive as authoritarian. At the heart of the increasing popularity of Reform UK is its critique of the Labour Party's recent trajectory. The move towards authoritarianism under Starmer, which includes limiting protest rights, expanding surveillance powers, and curbing free speech, has alienated many traditional Labour supporters. These supporters, who once viewed Labour as the protector of civil liberties and democratic values, are now searching for a political alternative that aligns with their beliefs. Reform UK has presented itself as that alternative, effectively capitalising on Starmer's unpopularity. As the government continues its crackdown, Reform UK has positioned itself as the defender of free speech, the rule of law, and individual rights, all values that resonate deeply with a broad swath of the population. The rising influence of Reform UK also signals a broader shift in the UK's political landscape, where the traditional two-party system is facing unprecedented challenges. The dominance of Labour and the Conservative Party has long been a hallmark of British politics, but the public's increasing dissatisfaction with both parties is breaking down these historical divisions. The rise of smaller insurgent parties, like Reform UK, reflects a growing desire for change, for a political system that is more representative of the people's interests and more responsive to their needs. This shift is reshaping the political discourse, creating an opening for new voices to be heard and new ideas to take root. Starmer's actions are also playing a significant role in the changing dynamics of British politics. His government's crackdown on dissent, which has included arrests and the stifling of protests, is increasingly seen as an overreach that undermines the fundamental principles of democracy. While Starmer justifies these measures as necessary for maintaining public order, critics argue that they represent a dangerous trend towards authoritarianism. The perception of Starmer as a leader willing to silence opposition has damaged his credibility and made him vulnerable to political challenges from both the right and the left. As public dissatisfaction with his government grows, so too does the potential for Reform UK to capitalise on this discontent and gain more political traction. One of the key strategic implications for Reform UK is the opportunity to consolidate the vote of disillusioned voters who are unhappy with both the Labour Party's shift to authoritarianism and the Conservative Party's handling of the Brexit process. Reform UK's message, which focuses on restoring British sovereignty, protecting civil liberties, and creating a more accountable government, has begun to resonate with voters who feel left behind by the political elite. This message appeals not only to traditional Conservatives who are unhappy with the government's Brexit policies, but also to former Labour voters who feel that Starmer's government no longer represents their values. Reform, UK's rising influence, is also a reflection of a broader trend in European politics, where populist and nationalist movements are gaining ground in response to growing dissatisfaction with the status quo. The appeal of these movements lies in their ability to tap into the frustrations of ordinary citizens who feel disconnected from the political system. Reform UK has successfully positioned itself as part of this broader political wave, aligning itself with populist movements across Europe that advocate for the restoration of national sovereignty, the protection of traditional values, and a more direct form of democracy. For Starmer, the rise of Reform UK presents a significant challenge. His government's crackdown on dissent is not only alienating voters, but also creating a fertile ground for Reform UK to gain more support. If Starmer is unable to adjust his approach and address the growing concerns about his government's overreach, he risks further damaging his party's standing and giving more ground to Reform UK. The Labour Party, once seen as the party of the people, now faces the difficult task of regaining the trust of its traditional supporters, many of whom are increasingly turning to Reform UK as a viable alternative. The political ramifications of this shift are profound, and the consequences for the future of British politics will be significant. If Reform UK continues to gain momentum and successfully challenges the dominance of the traditional parties, the UK could see a fundamental shift in its political system. Starmer's Labour Party, once the dominant force in British politics, now finds itself facing a growing threat from a political party that is capitalising on public disillusionment and offering a compelling alternative to the status quo. The coming months will be critical in determining whether Labour can reverse its fortunes or whether Reform UK will continue to rise as the new force in British politics. Keir Starmer's policies, particularly his aggressive stance towards public dissent, are raising serious concerns about the future of democracy and civil liberties in the United Kingdom. While some argue that these measures are necessary to maintain law and order, others fear they represent a significant erosion of fundamental freedoms that have long been at the core of British society. The long-term implications of Starmer's approach could be far-reaching, fundamentally altering the relationship between the state and its citizens, as well as changing the political dynamics in the country. Starmer's crackdown on protests, free speech and political dissent is likely to leave a lasting mark on the UK's democratic institutions, and the consequences of these actions will likely unfold over the next several years. One of the most significant concerns is the potential shift towards an authoritarian style of governance. As Starmer pushes forward with policies that restrict public protest and dissent, critics argue that he is undermining the basic tenets of democracy. The right to protest, often considered a cornerstone of democratic societies, is being restricted under the guise of maintaining public order and security. By allowing for the arrest of those who disagree with his policies, Starmer is sending a message that opposing views will not be tolerated, even if they are peaceful. This undermines the principle of freedom of expression, which is a fundamental right guaranteed by democratic societies. As this trend continues, it is possible that future leaders, regardless of political affiliation, may be emboldened to adopt similar tactics, further eroding the rights of citizens to express dissent. In addition to the suppression of protest, Starmer's government is also facing growing criticism for its stance on free speech. Laws aimed at curbing hate speech and political extremism, though well-intentioned, can be used to silence legitimate political debate and stifle the free exchange of ideas. In a democracy, open discourse is essential, and the fear of government intervention in speech acts as a chilling effect, discouraging individuals from voicing their opinions on sensitive topics. Starmer's policies could set a dangerous precedent, where government officials have the power to determine what is acceptable speech and what is not. This would have a profound impact on the public's ability to engage in open discussions, challenge government policies, and hold leaders accountable for their actions. Furthermore, the crackdown on political dissent could also have significant implications for the relationship between the state and its citizens. Historically, the UK has prided itself on being a nation that values individual rights and freedoms, but Starmer's approach risks reversing these gains. The more the government encroaches on personal liberties, the greater the sense of disillusionment, and alienation will become among the electorate. This alienation can result in lower levels of public trust in the government and its institutions, undermining the legitimacy of the state. If the government continues to use heavy-handed tactics to silence opposition, it may inadvertently strengthen the very movements it seeks to suppress. Political extremism often flourishes when people feel oppressed, marginalised, or ignored by the mainstream political system. Starmer's policies could, paradoxically, lead to the growth of fringe political movements that challenge the status quo in more radical ways. In the longer term, Starmer's policies may also undermine the UK's reputation on the global stage. The UK has long been seen as a champion of human rights and democracy, a status that has been built over decades of political and social progress. However, as Starmer's crackdown on civil liberties intensifies, the UK's international image could suffer. Global human rights organisations, foreign governments and international observers are likely to scrutinise the UK's domestic policies more closely. The perception that the UK is moving towards authoritarianism could result in diplomatic fallout, strained relationships with international allies, and a loss of credibility in global forums. This shift could also have economic consequences, as businesses and investors may be wary of operating in a country that appears to be undermining its democratic foundations. The erosion of civil liberties could make the UK a less attractive destination for talent, investment and collaboration, which would have negative consequences for the economy and the country's standing in the world. Moreover, Starmer's policies could have a long-lasting effect on the political culture in the UK. The suppression of political opposition and dissent has the potential to foster an environment of fear and self-censorship. Citizens may become hesitant to express their views or participate in protests, knowing that they could face arrest or harassment. This would create a chilling effect on political participation, undermining the vibrancy of the democratic process. In the long term, the inability of the public to freely express dissent could lead to a decline in civic engagement and political activism, leaving the political process in the hands of a small, elite group of individuals. Such a shift would make it even more difficult for ordinary citizens to influence the political system and would further entrench the power of the political establishment. Another critical area where Starmer's policies could have a lasting impact is the balance of power between the government and the judiciary. In a healthy democracy, the judiciary acts as a check on executive power, ensuring that the government cannot overstep its bounds. However, Starmer's government has increasingly sought to curtail the power of the judiciary and restrict its ability to hold the government accountable. By introducing legislation that weakens the independence of the judiciary, Starmer risks undermining one of the most important safeguards against authoritarianism. This could have serious implications for the rule of law, making it more difficult for citizens to challenge government decisions in the courts. If the judiciary becomes politicised or loses its independence, it would have far-reaching consequences for the UK's legal system and the protection of individual rights. The potential long-term effects of Starmer's policies on UK democracy and civil liberties are significant and cannot be overstated. While his government may argue that these measures are necessary for public safety, the risks to democratic freedoms and the rule of law are real and profound. The erosion of civil liberties, the suppression of free speech, and the weakening of the judiciary could fundamentally alter the UK's political system, creating a more authoritarian state that is less responsive to the needs and concerns of its citizens. The long-term consequences of these actions will depend on how the public, opposition parties, and civil society respond to these policies. If the backlash continues to grow, Starmer's government may find itself under increasing pressure to scale back its policies and restore the balance of power that has traditionally characterised the UK's democratic system. However, If Starmer continues down the path of suppressing dissent, the UK may face a future where democratic values are no longer safeguarded, and the government holds unprecedented power over its citizens.